My husband left me for his secretary and took every penny I had. I sold my wedding ring to buy a train ticket. At the station, when I saw a man shivering from the cold, I gave him my last $10 so he could eat something warm. 3 days later, a limousine stopped in front of the shelter where I was sleeping, and the driver said my name. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached." The divorce papers felt heavier than they should have in my trembling hands. 28 years of marriage reduced to cold legal language on cream-colored paper. I sat in my lawyer's office, staring at Wade's signature, so confident, so final, while mine remained a blank line waiting to seal my fate. "Mrs. Henderson, I need to be direct with you," my attorney said, his voice gentle but firm. "Your husband has been very thorough. The joint accounts, the savings, even the retirement fund, everything has been transferred or liquidated. Legally, since many assets were in his name." I stopped listening. The words became white noise as I watched snow begin to fall outside the window. At 52, I was starting over with nothing. Wade had planned this meticulously while I trusted him completely. 28 years of believing we were partners, and I was just the fool who never saw it coming. The secretary. Her name was Amber, and she was 26. I'd met her at the company Christmas party just 6 months ago. She'd complimented my dress with such sincerity that I'd actually liked her. The irony burned in my throat like acid. "The house will be sold to pay off the debts he accumulated," the lawyer continued. "You'll have approximately 72 hours to collect your personal belongings." I nodded mechanically, my mind still trying to process how Wade had managed to destroy our entire life while I was planning our upcoming 30th anniversary celebration. I'd been researching cruise destinations while he was planning my financial execution. Walking out of that office, I felt like a ghost. People passed by on the sidewalk, living their normal lives while mine crumbled around me. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Linda. "How did it go? Call me." I couldn't call her, not yet. Linda had warned me about Wade's recent behavior, his late nights at the office, his sudden interest in working out and buying new clothes. I'd defended him, called her paranoid. The shame of being so wrong felt worse than the betrayal itself. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of packing boxes and confronting the reality of my situation. Friends who I thought cared suddenly became unavailable. Apparently, word travels fast in small towns, and being the abandoned wife of a respected businessman made me a social pariah overnight. Wade came by on the last day to collect some items. He looked younger somehow, dressed in clothes I'd never seen before. Expensive clothes that Amber had probably picked out. "Rhonda, you have to understand," he started, but I held up my hand. "No, Wade, I don't have to understand anything. Just take what you came for and leave." He grabbed a few photo albums and his golf trophies. 28 years together, and that's what mattered to him. Not the family pictures where we looked happy, not the wedding album I'd cherished, just his golf trophies. "You'll be fine," he said as he headed toward the door. "You're stronger than you think." I almost laughed at the absurdity. He'd systematically destroyed my life and then had the audacity to give me a pep talk. But I didn't respond. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. After he left, I sat in our empty living room, my empty living room, and finally allowed myself to cry. Deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place I didn't know existed. I grieved not just for my marriage, but for the woman I'd been, the trusting woman who believed in happily ever after. I had exactly $2,300 to my name. The wedding ring on my finger was the only thing of value I had left. It was a beautiful ring. 2 carats in a vintage setting that had belonged to Wade's grandmother. The irony wasn't lost on me that the only valuable thing I possessed was a symbol of the love that had destroyed me. The pawn shop owner barely looked up when I walked in. "What can I do for you?" I slipped the ring off my finger for the last time. It left a pale band of skin that looked like a scar. "I need to sell this." He examined it under his jeweler's loupe, turning it this way and that. "Nice piece. Vintage setting. I can give you $800. $800 for 28 years of believing I was loved. It seemed about right. "I'll take it," I said. With my ring money and my savings, I bought a one-way train ticket to Denver. I'd never been to Colorado, but it seemed far enough away from the life that had imploded around me. Far enough away from the whispers and the pitying looks. The train station was nearly empty when I arrived that evening. A fierce snowstorm had begun, the kind that makes the world disappear behind a curtain of white. I clutched my single suitcase and purse, everything I owned reduced to what I could carry. That's when I saw him. An elderly man sat on a bench near the vending machines, wearing a thin coat that provided little protection against the cold. He was probably in his 70s, with silver hair and kind eyes that seemed lost. His hands shook, whether from cold or age I couldn't tell, as he searched through his pockets. I should have minded my own business. I had exactly $10.73 left after buying my ticket and a small bottle of water. $10 that would have to last until I figured out what to do in Denver. But watching him shiver in that inadequate coat, I couldn't walk away. "Excuse me," I said, approaching him slowly. "Are you all right?" He looked up with startled eyes, as if he wasn't used to strangers speaking to him. "Oh yes, I'm fine. Just waiting for my train." But he wasn't fine. I could see it in the way he held himself, the defeat in his shoulders. It was a posture I recognized because I'd been wearing it myself for days. "It's awfully cold tonight," I said, sitting down beside him. "Have you eaten anything?" He shook his head slightly. "I seem to have. Misplaced my wallet. But my train comes in a few hours. I'll be fine." Something about the way he said it, the quiet dignity mixed with obvious need, reminded me of my father. Dad had been proud like that, the kind of man who would rather go hungry than ask for help. I reached into my purse and pulled out my last $10 bill. The paper felt fragile between my fingers, representing the difference between having something and having nothing at all. "Please," I said, holding it out to him. "There's a coffee shop across the street. Get yourself something warm to eat." His eyes widened. "Oh, no, I couldn't. You're very kind, but please," I repeated. "It would make me feel better knowing you're warm and fed." He studied my face for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition of one kind soul reaching out to another in a moment of darkness. "Thank you," he said quietly, accepting the money. "You have no idea what this means to me." As he walked away into the swirling snow, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Peace, not happiness. I was still broken and lost and terrified of what came next. But for just a moment, I'd been able to help someone else, and that felt like enough. My train arrived an hour later, and I didn't see the old man again. As we pulled away from the station, I pressed my face to the window and watched the town disappear into the storm. I was leaving with nothing, heading toward an uncertain future, but somehow that act of kindness had given me something I'd lost in the wreckage of my marriage. Hope that there was still goodness in the world, even when everything else fell apart. Little did I know that those $10 would change everything. Denver in January was unforgiving. The cold bit through my thin coat like teeth, and the wind carried snow that stung my face as I stepped off the train. I'd imagined this moment differently, maybe feeling liberated, ready for a fresh start. Instead, I felt like a lost child in a city that seemed determined to swallow me whole. The train station was warmer than the streets, but I couldn't stay there forever. With 73 cents in my pocket and nowhere to go, I did something I'd never imagined I'd have to do. I asked for directions to the nearest homeless shelter. "About 8 blocks north," the information desk clerk told me, her voice professional but not unkind. "But you might want to hurry. They stop intake at 9 p.m. 8 blocks. In normal circumstances, that would be a pleasant walk. But carrying everything I owned in a suitcase, with snow falling steadily and the temperature dropping, those 8 blocks felt like a marathon. The Denver City Mission sat on a corner that had seen better days. The building was solid but worn, with yellow light spilling from windows that promised warmth. A small sign by the door read, "All are welcome." Those 3 words nearly brought me to tears. Inside, the smell hit me first. industrial disinfectant mixed with cooking food and too many people in too small a space. The lobby buzzed with quiet activity as staff members processed the evening's arrivals. "First time?" asked the woman behind the intake desk. She was probably my age, with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and eyes that had seen everything but still held compassion. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Name?" "Rhonda Henderson." She handed me a clipboard with forms. "Fill these out. We'll get you set up with a bed and a meal. Breakfast is at 7 and you'll need to be out by 8 a.m., but you can come back for dinner and overnight again." The questions on the form were straightforward but humbling. Emergency contact? I left that blank. Previous address? I wrote down the house that was no longer mine. Reason for homelessness? I stared at that line for a long time before writing simply, divorce. The dormitory was a large room filled with cots, each one representing someone's lowest point. Women of all ages, some younger than my daughter would have been if Wade and I had been blessed with children, others old enough to be my mother, each carrying her own story of how life had brought her here. My assigned cot was between a woman who couldn't have been older than 25 and another who might have been 60. The younger woman, Sarah, had kind eyes and introduced herself as she helped me figure out the sheet situation. "First night's always the hardest," she said quietly. "You learn the routine quick, though. Keep your valuables in your pillowcase, don't leave anything on the floor, and try not to take anything personally. People here are dealing with a lot." The woman on my other side, Margaret, had been at the shelter for 3 weeks. "Lost my apartment when my disability check got messed up," she explained. "Bureaucracy moves slow, but hunger moves fast, you know?" That first night, I lay awake listening to the sounds of 30 women trying to find peace in a place that offered shelter, but not true rest. Some cried quietly. Others snored. A few whispered prayers into the darkness. I found myself thinking about the old man at the train station, hoping he'd found somewhere warm to sleep. The next morning came too early. 7 a.m. breakfast was oatmeal, toast, and coffee that was strong enough to wake the dead. I sat with Sarah and Margaret, learning the unspoken rules of shelter life. Where to go during the day when you had no job to report to. Which libraries stayed open longest. Which churches served free lunches. "You got any skills?" Margaret asked. "The job search is hard when you don't have an address, but some places are understanding." I almost laughed. 28 years as a homemaker, volunteering at charity events and managing a household. What did that translate to in the real world? "I'm not sure," I admitted. Days blurred together. I walked the streets looking for work, but every application asked for an address, a phone number, references. I was caught in the cruel cycle of needing a job to get housing and needing housing to get a job. My 73 cents had quickly become nothing, and I relied entirely on the shelter's meals and whatever free food I could find. The other women became my unlikely family. Sarah was saving for nursing school while working at a fast food place that paid under the table. Margaret had been a teacher before chronic illness derailed her life. Each had dreams deferred, but not destroyed. On my third night, I was settling into my cot when commotion erupted near the front desk. Through the dormitory door, I could see lights flashing outside, red and blue like police cars. My heart raced. Had something happened? Were we in trouble? But then I heard one of the staff members calling my name. "Rhonda Henderson? Is there a Rhonda Henderson here?" Sarah nudged me. "That's you, isn't it?" I stood on shaky legs and made my way to the front desk. Through the windows, I could see not police cars, but a sleek black limousine parked outside. The vehicle looked so out of place in this neighborhood that it might as well have been a spaceship. "Ma'am," said the staff member, a young man whose name tag read Marcus, "there's someone here to see you." "To see me?" My voice cracked. "Are you sure?" A man in a crisp black suit stepped through the front door, brushing snow from his shoulders. He was probably in his 50s, with silver-streaked hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to being in charge. His eyes scanned the room until they found me. "Mrs. Henderson?" I nodded, confused and a little frightened. "My name is James Crawford. I'm here on behalf of someone you helped a few days ago. Someone who would very much like to speak with you." The room had gone quiet. Every person in the lobby was staring at us, at the impossible scene of a woman in shelter clothes being summoned by a man who clearly belonged to a different world entirely. "I'm sorry," I said, "but I think there's been a mistake. I haven't helped anyone who—" I stopped. The train station. The old man. The $10 I'd given him when I had almost nothing myself. "There's no mistake," James said gently. "Would you be willing to come with me? I assure you, you're in no trouble." Quite the opposite. Sarah appeared at my elbow. "You don't have to go anywhere with anyone," she said protectively. "You want me to call the police?" I looked at James's face, trying to read his intentions. There was something sincere in his expression, something that reminded me of the old man's quiet dignity. "It's about the gentleman at the train station, isn't it?" I asked. James smiled. The first genuine smile I'd seen in what felt like years. "Yes, ma'am. Mr. Hartwell has been quite anxious to find you. He has something he'd like to discuss." Mr. Hartwell, so that was his name. I looked around the shelter, at the women who had become my temporary family, at the life I'd been building from scraps and determination. "Will you bring me back?" I asked. "If that's what you wish," James replied. "But I think you might want to hear what Mr. Hartwell has to say first." Margaret shuffled over and squeezed my hand. "Honey, sometimes angels come in unexpected packages. Maybe it's time to see what this is about." I gathered my few belongings, it didn't take long, and followed James out into the cold night. The limousine was warm and luxurious beyond anything I'd ever experienced. Leather seats, soft lighting, and classical music playing quietly from hidden speakers. As we pulled away from the shelter, I watched it disappear in the rear window. 3 days ago, I'd walked through those doors broken and desperate. Now I was riding in a limousine toward an unknown future. All because I'd given my last $10 to a stranger who looked cold and hungry. Whatever was waiting for me, I knew my life was about to change again. I just prayed it would be for the better this time. The limousine glided through Denver's upscale neighborhoods, past houses that glowed with warm light and prosperity. I pressed my face to the tinted window, watching a world I'd once belonged to, but now felt like a tourist observing from the outside. "Where are we going?" I asked James, my voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Hartwell's home," he replied. "He's quite eager to see you again." 20 minutes later, we turned through massive iron gates that opened silently as we approached. The driveway curved through landscaped grounds that even in winter looked meticulously maintained. When the house came into view, I actually gasped. It wasn't just large, it was magnificent. A stone mansion that looked like it belonged in an English countryside, with tall windows glowing golden against the night sky. This wasn't new money trying to impress. This was old wealth that didn't need to prove anything to anyone. "Mrs. Henderson," James said as we stopped in front of the main entrance, "before we go in, I want you to know that Mr. Hartwell is a very private man. What happened at the train station, it meant more to him than you could possibly imagine." The front door opened before we could knock, revealing the old man from the train station. But he looked completely different now. Gone was the thin coat and the defeated posture. He stood straight and dignified, wearing an expensive sweater and wool slacks. His silver hair was neatly combed, and his eyes, those same kind eyes, held a warmth that made my chest tighten with emotion. "Rhonda," he said, and just hearing him say my name with such genuine pleasure nearly undid me. "Thank you for coming. Please, come in out of the cold." The foyer was breathtaking. Marble floors, crystal chandelier, and a sweeping staircase that belonged in a movie. But what struck me most was how warm it felt despite its grandeur. Family photographs lined the walls, and fresh flowers sat on antique tables. "I'm William Hartwell," he said, extending his hand, "and I owe you an enormous debt of gratitude." "Mr. Hartwell, I don't understand. You don't owe me anything. It was just $10. His eyes crinkled at the corners. "Just $10. Come, let's sit by the fire, and I'll explain everything." He led me to a library that was like something from a dream. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather chairs positioned around a crackling fireplace, and the smell of old books and polished wood. He gestured for me to sit in one of the chairs while he settled into the one across from me. "First, I want to apologize for the deception," he began. "What you saw at the train station, that wasn't exactly who I am." I studied his face, trying to reconcile this distinguished gentleman with the lost-looking man I'd encountered 3 nights ago. "Who are you?" William leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. "I'm what you might call a very wealthy man, Rhonda. I made my fortune in real estate development and investments. But wealth, I've learned, can be both a blessing and a curse." He stood and walked to the mantelpiece, where a large photograph showed him with a beautiful woman who appeared to be about my age. She had kind eyes and a radiant smile. "That's my wife, Eleanor. Was my wife. She passed away 8 months ago." The pain in his voice was unmistakable, and I felt my heart clench in sympathy. "I'm so sorry." 43 years of marriage," he continued, his voice thick with emotion. "She was everything good in my life. Eleanor had this incredible ability to see the best in people, to believe that kindness still existed in the world even when evidence suggested otherwise." He turned back to me, and I saw tears glistening in his eyes. "After she died, I became lost, bitter even. I started to believe that people only cared about money, that genuine kindness was extinct. I began to hate what my wealth represented because it seemed to bring out the worst in people around me." I shifted forward in my chair, drawn into his story despite my confusion about why he was sharing it with me. 3 weeks ago, I had what I suppose you'd call a breakdown. I told James I needed to get away, to see if there was any goodness left in the world. So I put on old clothes, took no identification, no credit cards, nothing that would identify me as William Hartwell. I wanted to see how people would treat me when I had nothing to offer them. My breath caught as understanding began to dawn. For 3 weeks, I wandered through different cities, different neighborhoods. I visited shelters, sat in parks, stood on street corners. Do you know what I discovered? His voice turned bitter. People walked past me like I was invisible. Not one person offered help. Not one person even made eye contact. I began to think Eleanor had been wrong, that kindness really was dead. He moved closer to my chair, his eyes intense. "And then, I met you at that train station. Mr. Hartwell, you were clearly struggling yourself," he interrupted. "I could see it in your posture, in the way you held that single suitcase like it contained everything you owned. You had every reason to ignore me, to focus on your own problems, but instead, you sat down beside me. You talked to me like I was a human being worth caring about." I thought back to that moment, remembering the defeated way he'd held himself. "You reminded me of my father. He was proud like that, too proud to ask for help even when he needed it." William's eyes softened. "And then you gave me your last $10. James has since confirmed that you had exactly 73 cents left after giving me that money. You literally gave me everything you had." The room fell silent except for the crackling of the fire. I felt overwhelmed, unable to process what he was telling me. "But why?" I finally asked. "Why was it so important to you?" William returned to his chair, leaning forward earnestly. "Because in that moment, you proved Eleanor right. You proved that kindness isn't dead, that there are still people in this world who will help a stranger simply because it's the right thing to do. You saved more than my faith in humanity, Rhonda. You quite literally saved my life. I don't understand." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I was planning to end it all. That night at the train station was supposed to be my last test. If no one showed me kindness, if no one proved that good people still existed, I was going to. Well, it doesn't matter now. Because you did show me kindness. You gave me hope." The weight of his words hit me like a physical blow. My simple act of compassion had saved a man's life. I started to cry, not the gentle tears I'd been fighting back, but deep, overwhelming sobs. "Oh, my dear," William said, moving to kneel beside my chair. "I didn't mean to upset you. You don't understand," I managed between sobs. "These past few weeks I've felt so useless, so worthless. My husband left me with nothing, and I started to believe that maybe I really was worthless, that maybe I'd never mattered to anyone." William handed me a handkerchief, real linen, monogrammed with his initials. "You matter, Rhonda. You matter so much that you changed the entire course of my life with a single act of kindness. I wiped my eyes and looked around the magnificent room, at this man who commanded respect and resources I couldn't imagine. What happens now? William smiled, and for the first time since I'd walked into his home, he looked like the lost man I'd met at the train station. That depends on you. I have a proposition, but first I want you to know that you owe me nothing. You've already given me everything: my life, my hope, my faith. Anything I offer you now is simply my way of trying to balance the scales. What kind of proposition? I run a charitable foundation, the Eleanor Hartwell Foundation for Human Services. We fund homeless shelters, job training programs, food banks, programs that help people rebuild their lives. Eleanor started it, and I've continued her work, but... He paused, choosing his words carefully. I've been managing it from a distance, through accountants and lawyers. I think Eleanor would have wanted someone with real experience, someone who understands what it means to need help, to run the day-to-day operations. My heart began to race. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a purpose if you want it, a chance to help other people the way you helped me. The position comes with a salary of $75,000 per year, full benefits, and a small apartment above the foundation's offices. $75,000. It was more money than I'd ever imagined making on my own. But more than that, it was a chance to matter again, to use my pain to help other people heal. Why me? I asked. You could hire anyone, someone with credentials and experience. William's smile was gentle but firm. Because you understand what it means to lose everything and still find compassion for others. Because when you had nothing, you gave everything. That's not something you can learn in school, Rhonda. That's something you carry in your heart. I looked around the beautiful room, thinking of the shelter I'd left behind, of Sarah and Margaret and all the other women trying to rebuild their lives from nothing. This felt like a dream, too good to be true. Can I ask you something? I said. Anything. That night at the train station, if I hadn't helped you, would you really have? William was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. I'd like to think I would have found another way, but I was in a very dark place. What I do know is that your kindness brought me back to the light. You reminded me that Eleanor's vision of the world, a world where people take care of each other, is worth fighting for. I thought about Wade, about how he'd destroyed my life and left me with nothing but 73 cents and a heart full of pain. But maybe, just maybe, he'd actually set me free to become the person I was meant to be. I accept, I said, my voice steady for the first time in weeks. I accept your offer. William's face lit up with genuine joy. Eleanor would have loved you, he said. She always said that angels don't always have wings. Sometimes they just have kind hearts and $10 they can't afford to give away. As I sat in that beautiful library, surrounded by the warmth of the fire and the promise of a new beginning, I realized that my lowest moment had led me to this highest one. Sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of something beautiful. 6 weeks into my new life, I was standing in the Eleanor Hartwell Foundation offices, reviewing applications for emergency housing assistance, when James knocked on my door. Mrs. Henderson, there's someone here to see you. He says he's your husband. My pen slipped from my fingers, leaving an ink blot on the application I'd been reading. My ex-husband, I corrected automatically, my heart already racing. Wade. Through my office window, I could see him in the waiting area. He looked older somehow, worn around the edges in a way that expensive clothes couldn't hide. His hair was thinner than I remembered, and there were new lines around his eyes. But what struck me most was his posture. Uncertain, almost nervous. This wasn't the confident man who'd walked out of our marriage with such arrogant finality. Would you like me to ask him to leave? James offered. He'd become protective of me over the past month, treating me with a respect I was still learning to accept. No, I said, surprising myself with my calm tone. I'll see him, but please stay nearby. Wade entered my office with the forced smile he used to use on difficult clients. His eyes swept over the elegant space, the mahogany desk, the leather chairs, the certificates of appreciation from various charities already hanging on the walls. Rhonda, you look good. His voice carried a note of surprise that irritated me more than it should have. Thank you. What do you want, Wade? He settled into the chair across from my desk without being invited. Can't a man visit his wife, his ex-wife, without having an ulterior motive? I leaned back in my chair, studying him. 28 years of marriage had taught me to read his tells. The way he adjusted his wedding ring, which he was still wearing, I noticed. The slight twitch at the corner of his mouth when he was preparing to lie. The overly casual tone that meant he was about to ask for something significant. How did you find me? I asked. It wasn't easy. You disappeared completely after. He gestured vaguely, unable or unwilling to say, after I destroyed your life. But then a friend of mine in Denver mentioned seeing your name in the newspaper. Something about a charity foundation. Of course. Last week, the Denver Post had run a feature about the foundation's new programs for homeless women. William had insisted on including my photo, despite my protests about privacy. So you decided to pay me a visit. Wade shifted in his chair, and I caught a glimpse of something I'd never seen in him before. Desperation. Rhonda, I've made some mistakes. Mistakes? The word came out sharper than I intended. You emptied our bank accounts, left me with nothing, and moved in with your secretary. Those weren't mistakes, Wade. Those were choices. His face flushed. Amber and I, that's over. Has been for weeks now. I felt nothing at this revelation. No satisfaction, no vindication, just a mild curiosity about why he thought I'd care. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. And I was surprised to realize I meant it. Not because I wanted him back, but because I'd learned that pain was pain, regardless of who was experiencing it. The thing is, Wade continued, his voice taking on the persuasive tone he'd once used to sell insurance policies. I've been doing a lot of thinking. About us. About what I threw away. Wade, let me finish. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. I know I hurt you. I know I made terrible choices. But seeing you here, seeing what you've accomplished, it reminds me of the woman I fell in love with 30 years ago. 30 years ago. Before children who never came. Before the slow erosion of intimacy. Before he decided I wasn't enough anymore. You left me with nothing, I said quietly. You made sure I couldn't even afford to eat. Do you understand what that did to me? Wade's face crumpled with what looked like genuine remorse. I was angry. Confused. I don't know what I thought. That you'd be fine. That you'd land on your feet. You always were the strong one. I ended up in a homeless shelter, Wade. The words hit him like a physical blow. He actually recoiled, his face going pale. What? A homeless shelter. 3 days sleeping on a cot, eating charity meals, trying to figure out how to rebuild a life you'd systematically destroyed. Rhonda, I had no idea. Of course you didn't. You were too busy playing house with Amber to care what happened to the woman you'd been married to for 28 years. Wade was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he looked up, there were tears in his eyes. I want to make it right. You can't. I can try. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. I had my lawyer draw this up. It's a financial settlement, more than fair. It gives you half of everything I have left. I didn't touch the papers. What do you mean, everything you have left? Wade's laugh was bitter. Turns out 26-year-olds are expensive. Amber had very particular tastes. The sports car, the luxury apartment, the shopping trips. It added up fast. And when she realized the money was running out faster than expected, she decided I wasn't quite the catch she thought I was. So that was it. Amber had left him when the financial well started running dry, and now he was here, trying to win back the woman he'd discarded. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. I'm not your backup plan, Wade. That's not what this is. But his tone suggested otherwise. I've missed you, Rhonda. Missed us. What we had was real, even if I forgot that for a while. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street below where people hurried past in their daily lives. A few months ago, I'd been one of them, lost, desperate, invisible. Now I had purpose, respect, a future I was building for myself, What we had was real once, I agreed. But you killed it when you chose to betray everything we'd built together. People make mistakes. People change. You're right, I said, turning back to face him. I've changed. I'm not the same woman who depended on you for everything, who built her entire identity around being your wife. I like who I am now, Wade. I like the life I'm building. Wade stood as well, moving closer. But imagine what we could build together. You're clearly successful here, this foundation, this position. And I still have resources, connections. We could be a team again. A team, as if we'd ever really been partners rather than him being the star and me the supporting player. I notice you're still wearing your wedding ring, I observed. Wade looked down at his hand as if surprised to see the gold band there. I never took it off. Even with Amber, part of me always knew I'd made a mistake. But you didn't come looking for me until now. Until Amber left you and the money started running out. His face reddened. It's exactly what this is. I moved back to my desk, putting the solid wood between us. You didn't miss me, Wade. You missed the convenience of having someone who would put up with anything, who would make your life easier without asking for much in return. That's not fair, isn't it? I sat down, feeling suddenly tired. For 28 years, I accommodated your career, your hobbies, your friends, your family. I rearranged my life around yours so completely that I forgot I even had preferences of my own. And when you decided you wanted something new and exciting, you threw me away like I was disposable. Wade sank back into his chair, the fight going out of him. What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? I am. That I was wrong? I was. That I love you? I do. Do you? I asked softly. Or do you love the idea of having someone who'll take care of you again? Someone who'll make your life comfortable while you figure out your next move? He didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. I want you to leave now, I said. Rhonda, take your settlement offer with you. I don't want your money, and I don't want your promises. I've built something here that's mine, something that matters. I won't give that up to go back to being your supporting character. Wade stood slowly, his face a mixture of hurt and anger. So that's it? 30 years together and you're just going to throw it all away? You threw it away when you chose Amber over our marriage. I'm just refusing to pick up the pieces for you. He moved toward the door, then stopped. You know what your problem is, Rhonda. You've gotten bitter. The woman I married would have forgiven me. His words were meant to hurt, to make me doubt myself. A few months ago, they might have worked. But I'd learned too much about my own strength to be manipulated by his disappointment. You're right, I said calmly. The woman you married would have forgiven you, taken you back, and spent the rest of her life wondering when you'd leave again. But I'm not that woman anymore, and I'm grateful for that. Wade left without another word, taking his settlement papers and his empty promises with him. After the door closed, I sat in the quiet of my office, waiting to feel something. Sadness, regret, doubt. But all I felt was relief. My phone buzzed with a text from William. Dinner tonight? I have some ideas for expanding the job training program. I smiled as I typed back, I'll be there. This was my life now. Meaningful work, genuine respect, a future I was creating for myself. Wade had done me a favor by showing me what I'd lost, but more importantly, he'd shown me how much I'd gained. 3 days after Wade's visit, I was working late at the foundation when James appeared in my doorway with a concerned expression. Mrs. Henderson, your ex-husband is back. He's quite insistent about seeing you, and he seems agitated. Through my office window, I could see Wade pacing in the waiting area. Even from a distance, his distress was obvious. His hair was disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled, and his movements had the jerky quality of someone running on desperation and too much caffeine. It's all right, James. Send him in, but please stay close. Wade burst through my door before James could properly announce him, his face flushed and his eyes wild. This wasn't the composed, somewhat contrite man who'd visited me earlier in the week. This was someone on the edge of collapse. We need to talk, he said without preamble, his voice hoarse. You're welcome to sit down, I replied calmly, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. But he remained standing, his hands clenched at his sides. You have to take me back, Rhonda. I'm begging you. The naked desperation in his voice should have moved me. Once, it would have. But I'd learned to see past his emotional manipulations to the calculations underneath. Wade, you're clearly upset. Maybe you should go home and— I don't have a home! The words exploded out of him. They foreclosed on the house yesterday. The house. Rhonda? Our house. I felt a small pang of sadness for the home where we'd built our life together. But it was distant, like mourning something that had belonged to different people in a different lifetime. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I meant it. But I don't understand what you expect me to do about it. Wade dropped into the chair, his head in his hands. It's all gone. Everything. The house, the savings, the retirement accounts. Amber. She didn't just spend money on herself. She had debts, gambling debts, credit cards I didn't know about. She used my name, my credit. The picture was becoming clearer. Wade hadn't just been supporting a young mistress with expensive tastes. He'd been unknowingly funding her addictions. When did you find out? I asked. 2 weeks ago, after she left. The bills started coming in, collection agencies calling. I tried to handle it myself, thought I could work something out, but he looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. I need help, Rhonda. I need you. There it was, the real reason for his return. Not love, not remorse, but financial necessity. I should have felt vindicated, but instead I just felt tired. You want me to help you financially? Not just money, he said quickly. Though yes, I know you're doing well here, and I thought maybe. But it's more than that. I need stability. I need someone who knows me, who understands. Someone who'll clean up your mess, I interrupted. Wade's face flushed. That's not what this is. Isn't it? You come here talking about love and second chances, but what you're really asking is for me to rescue you from the consequences of your choices. Again. I made mistakes. You made choices, Wade. You chose to leave our marriage. You chose to empty our accounts. You chose to trust someone you barely knew with our financial future. These weren't mistakes. They were decisions. Wade stood abruptly, beginning to pace again. Fine. Yes, I made bad decisions. But we're married. We're married. We're divorced, remember? Your idea. We can fix that. We can remarry. We can— Wade, stop. My voice was firm enough to cut through his increasingly frantic words. Listen to yourself. You're not asking me to take you back because you love me. You're asking because you need someone to take care of you. That's what marriage is, he snapped, his desperation finally turning to anger. People taking care of each other. I took care of you for 28 years. You took care of me? I stood up, feeling my own anger rise for the first time since he'd walked back into my life. I cooked your meals, cleaned your house, managed your social calendar, and organized your entire life while you worked and played golf and complained about being tired. When exactly were you taking care of me? I provided for you. I gave you a home, security. You gave me dependency, I corrected. You made sure I couldn't survive without you, and then you used that as leverage whenever I disagreed with something you wanted. Wade stared at me as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. Where is this coming from? You never complained before, because I didn't know I had the right to complain. I thought that was just what marriage was supposed to be. Me making your life easier while you made all the decisions. And now you think you're better than that? Better than me? The question hung in the air between us, loaded with years of unspoken resentment. Wade's face was twisted with a mixture of hurt and fury, as if my refusal to rescue him was a personal betrayal. I think I deserve better than being someone's fallback plan, I said quietly. A soft knock at the door interrupted us. William entered, his presence immediately changing the energy in the room. He was dressed casually, khakis and a sweater, but carried himself with the quiet authority that came from genuine confidence. Rhonda, I apologize for interrupting. James said you might need— He stopped as his eyes took in Wade's agitated state and my tense posture. Is everything all right? Wade straightened, his insurance salesman instincts kicking in despite his emotional state. And you are? William Hartwell, William replied calmly, stepping into the room. I'm the foundation's founder, and you must be Wade. Something flickered across Wade's face. Recognition, maybe, or calculation. Hartwell. As in Hartwell Properties? Hartwell Industries? Among other things, William confirmed. Rhonda has been invaluable to our organization. Truly irreplaceable. Wade's eyes darted between William and me, and I could practically see the wheels turning in his head. How well do you two know each other? Well enough, William said, his tone pleasant but with an edge that suggested Wade should be careful about his next words. I see. Wade's voice took on a nasty tone I recognized from his worst moments during our marriage. And I suppose you think you know all about our relationship? About what we meant to each other? I know that Rhonda is one of the most compassionate, intelligent, and resilient people I've ever had the privilege to meet, William replied evenly. I know that she's built something remarkable here in just a few months, and I know that anyone who couldn't see her worth doesn't deserve her. Wade's face went red. You don't know anything about our marriage, about what we built together, about what she owes me, what she owes you. William's voice remained calm, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. What exactly do you think she owes you? 28 years of my life, 28 years of providing for her, supporting her. Supporting her? William stepped closer to Wade, his presence suddenly intimidating despite his calm demeanor. Is that what you call it when you empty every account, leave her with nothing, and force her into a homeless shelter? Wade's mouth fell open. She told you about that. She told me about your cruelty, yes. She also told me about your selfishness, your betrayal, and your complete disregard for her well-being. Did you really think she'd keep your secrets? Now wait just a minute. No, you wait. William's voice was still quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. You destroyed this woman's life because you were bored with your marriage. You left her with nothing because you were too much of a coward to face the consequences of your choices honestly. And now you have the audacity to come here demanding that she clean up another mess you've made. Wade looked between William and me, his face cycling through confusion, anger, and growing realization. How much has she told you? Everything that matters, William replied, including the fact that you're here because your latest relationship has left you bankrupt, not because you've suddenly realized what you lost. The words hit Wade like physical blows. His shoulders sagged, and for a moment, he looked like the broken old man he was becoming. It's not like that, he said weakly, isn't it? William pulled out his phone and scrolled through something before showing Wade the screen. Foreclosure notice filed 8 days ago. Bankruptcy petition filed 6 days ago. Credit rating dropped to subprime 4 days ago. Should I continue? Wade's face went white. How do you? I make it my business to know about threats to people I care about, William said simply. Did you really think you could come here and manipulate Rhonda without anyone checking into your situation? I stared at William, realizing that he'd been protecting me in ways I hadn't even known I needed protection. The thought should have bothered me. I'd worked so hard to become independent, but instead it felt like the actions of someone who truly cared about my well-being. Wade slumped back into his chair, the fight going out of him completely. I don't have anywhere else to go. For the first time since he'd walked back into my life, I felt genuine pity for him, not the manipulative emotion he'd been trying to evoke, but real sadness for a man who'd destroyed everything good in his life and was now facing the consequences alone. Wade, I said gently, I'm sorry you're going through this. I really am, but I can't be your solution. Why not? His voice was barely above a whisper. We were good together once, a long time ago, but that was before you taught me that I was dispensable, before you showed me that your love came with conditions I could never meet. Wade looked up at me, and for a moment, I saw a flash of the man I'd fallen in love with 30 years ago. Young, uncertain, trying to figure out how to be an adult in a complicated world. I loved you, he said quietly. I know, I replied, and I loved you too. But love isn't enough when it's not paired with respect, with loyalty, with basic human decency. Wade nodded slowly, acceptance finally beginning to replace desperation in his expression. He stood up, straightening his wrinkled suit jacket. I guess this is goodbye then. I guess it is. He walked to the door, then turned back one last time. For what it's worth, I'm glad you found something that makes you happy. I'm glad you're not the woman I left behind. After he was gone, William and I stood in the quiet of my office, the weight of finality settling around us. "Are you all right?" William asked. I thought about it honestly. "Yes," I said, surprised by how true it felt. "I think I really am." 1 year later, I stood in the main hall of the Eleanor Hartwell Foundation during our annual benefit dinner, watching as 300 guests mingled beneath crystal chandeliers and bid on silent auction items. The event had raised over $200,000 for our programs, but more importantly, it had brought together people who truly cared about making a difference. Nervous, William appeared beside me, elegant in his black tuxedo, but with the warm smile that had become so familiar over the past months. "Excited," I corrected, smoothing the skirt of my navy blue dress, a far cry from the shelter clothes I'd worn the first time we met. "Look at this turnout. Eleanor would have been thrilled." "She would have been thrilled about you," William said quietly. "About what you've built here." Over the past year, the foundation had expanded beyond anything I'd imagined possible. We'd opened a job training center, a childcare facility for mothers in transition, and a financial literacy program. But the project I was most proud of was the mentorship program that paired women who'd rebuilt their lives with those just beginning their journey. Sarah from the shelter was now one of our most effective mentors, having completed nursing school and found her own apartment. "Mrs. Henderson?" A young woman approached, Maria, one of our recent program graduates. "I wanted to thank you again for everything. I start my new job as a medical assistant on Monday. You did the work, Maria. I just provided some guidance." As Maria walked away, beaming with confidence, I felt the deep satisfaction that had become a constant in my new life. This was what purpose felt like. Not just existing, but mattering. "Rhonda?" A familiar voice made me turn. Margaret from the shelter stood nearby, wearing a simple but elegant black dress and holding the arm of a distinguished gentleman with silver hair. "Margaret, you look wonderful." She beamed. "I wanted you to meet my husband, Robert. We married last month." Robert shook my hand warmly. "Margaret has told me so much about you, about how you helped her navigate the system when her disability payments were delayed." "We helped each other," I said, meaning it. "That's what family does." After they moved on, William and I found ourselves alone again near the windows overlooking the city. The lights of Denver stretched out below us, each one representing lives being lived, dreams being pursued, stories unfolding. "I have something for you," William said, reaching into his jacket pocket. "William, you've already given me so much. This isn't from me." He handed me an envelope with my name written in shaky handwriting. It arrived this morning. I opened it carefully, unfolding a single sheet of paper. The return address made my breath catch. It was from Wade. "Dear Rhonda," the letter began, "I hope this finds you well and happy. I wanted you to know that I've spent the past year in a treatment program, not just for the financial mess I made, but for the emotional and psychological issues that led me to make such destructive choices. I won't bore you with details, but I wanted you to know that I understand now what I did to you, and why my recent attempts to win you back were just more of the same selfish behavior. You deserve so much better than what I gave you, both during our marriage and after. I'm writing to tell you that I'm doing better. I found a job as a bookkeeper for a small nonprofit. The pay isn't much, but it's honest work, and I'm learning to live within my means. More importantly, I'm learning to live with myself. I saw the newspaper article about the foundation's expansion and your promotion to executive director. I'm proud of you, Rhonda. Proud of the woman you've become, though I suspect you were always that woman. I was just too self-centered to see it. I don't expect or want a response to this letter. I just wanted you to know that I'm grateful for the lesson you taught me when you refused to rescue me. It was the hardest gift anyone has ever given me, but it was exactly what I needed. I hope you're as happy as you deserve to be. With respect and gratitude, Wade. I read the letter twice, feeling an unexpected lightness in my chest. Not joy exactly, but a sense of completion, as if the last painful chapter of my old life had finally found its proper ending. Good news? William asked gently. Closure, I said, folding the letter carefully. Finally. William nodded, understanding without needing explanation. Over the past year, our friendship had deepened into something I was still learning to name. It wasn't romance. We were both too aware of our respective journeys to rush into anything complicated. But it was companionship, mutual respect, and a shared sense of purpose that felt more solid than any relationship I'd ever experienced. "There's something else," William said. "Something I've been wanting to discuss with you." "Oh?" He smiled, but I detected a hint of nervousness. "I've been thinking about expanding the foundation's reach, opening branches in other cities, but that would mean more travel, more responsibility, more opportunity to help people," I finished. "What are you asking?" "I'm asking if you'd consider taking over as chief executive officer of the entire organization. It would mean a substantial salary increase to $150,000 per year and equity ownership in the foundation's properties. But more than that, it would mean the freedom to expand our mission however you see fit." $150,000. A year ago, I'd been grateful for free meals at a homeless shelter. Now I was being offered the kind of position I'd never dreamed possible. "Why me?" I asked, though I was beginning to understand his answer. "Because you understand what it means to need help, and you understand what it takes to rebuild a life. Because you have a vision for how we can do more than just provide temporary relief. We can provide permanent transformation, and because Eleanor would have chosen you." I looked around the room at the celebration of hope and second chances, at the faces of people who'd found their way back from the brink. A year ago, I'd been one of them. Now I was in a position to ensure that others would have the same opportunity. "I accept," I said. William's smile was radiant. "Eleanor always said that angels come disguised as ordinary people doing extraordinary things. I think she was talking about you." "She was talking about all of us," I corrected. "Everyone who chooses kindness when they could choose selfishness. Everyone who helps when they could walk away." As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, I found myself standing once again by the windows. But this time I wasn't looking at the city lights. I was watching William say goodbye to the last of the donors, his easy grace and genuine warmth evident in every interaction. "Penny for your thoughts?" he said, rejoining me. "I was thinking about train stations," I said. "About how sometimes the worst moment of your life leads directly to the best." "No regrets, then?" I considered the question seriously. A year ago, I'd lost everything I thought mattered. My marriage, my home, my financial security, my sense of identity. But in losing those things, I'd found something more valuable. My own strength, my capacity for independence, my ability to matter in the world on my own terms. "No regrets," I said firmly. "Not about the divorce, not about the shelter, not even about giving you my last $10, especially not about that." William laughed. "Best $10 I ever received. Best $10 I ever spent." As we prepared to leave, I took one last look around the foundation offices. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to help people rebuild their lives from the ground up. But tonight, I was simply grateful for the journey that had brought me here, for the people who'd helped me along the way, and for the future I was building one act of kindness at a time. The snow was falling again as William and I walked to our cars, but this time it didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like a blessing, covering the world in fresh possibility. "Dinner tomorrow?" William asked. "I have some ideas for the Phoenix expansion." "I'll be there," I said, and for the first time in years, I knew exactly where there was, not just a place, but a purpose. A home I'd built for myself out of compassion and determination. As I drove through the quiet streets of Denver, I thought about the woman who'd stepped off that train a year ago, with nothing but a suitcase and 73 cents. She'd been broken, desperate, and convinced that her life was over. She'd been wrong. Her life was just beginning. The radio played softly as I made my way home to the comfortable apartment I'd earned through my own efforts, filled with furniture I'd chosen and books I wanted to read. Tomorrow, I would wake up with work that mattered, colleagues who respected me, and a future limited only by my own imagination. Wade had done me a favor when he destroyed our marriage, though it had taken me a year to see it. He'd freed me to discover who I really was when I wasn't trying to be what someone else needed. He'd forced me to find my own strength, my own voice, my own worth. And that $10 I'd given to a stranger in a snowstorm, it had been the best investment I'd ever made. Not because of what it brought me, but because of what it taught me about the person I was meant to be. Sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of a better one. Sometimes falling apart is really falling into place. And sometimes when you think you've lost everything, you discover you've actually found yourself. I pulled into my parking space and sat for a moment in the quiet car, snowflakes dancing in the headlight beams. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new stories of transformation and hope. But tonight, I was simply content to be exactly where I was, free, purposeful, and finally, truly home. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.